All right, let's talk about something that literally keeps the entire business world spinning: inventory. Welcome to this explainer on inventory management. Whether you're aiming to run a massive global logistics network or you just want to make a local retail shop run a bit smoother, mastering inventory is absolutely crucial. It's the lifeblood of product-based commerce. But, as we're going to see today, it is also a wildly delicate balancing act. You know, Rhonda Abrams hit the nail on the head when she said, inventory is money sitting around in a different form. That perfectly frames our entire discussion today, because too often we walk into a warehouse and just see boxes sitting on shelves. But that's not just cardboard, that is capital. It's cash tied up in physical goods. Carrying way too much inventory brings huge holding costs, the risk of things expiring, and it's a massive opportunity cost, right? Because you could be using that cash elsewhere. But on the flip side, if you carry too little, you're risking stockouts, losing sales, and honestly, severely damaging your reputation. So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We've got 5 key areas. Number 1, the fundamentals of inventory management. 2, calculating the perfect order. 3, smart inventory strategies. 4, a vendor-managed inventory case. And 5, sustainable and digital inventory. By the time we wrap this up, you're going to have a really solid grasp on how to categorize your stock, calculate exact order quantities using established math, and apply modern strategies to minimize waste and maximize efficiency for literally any organization. Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, Fundamentals of Inventory Management, what it is and why on earth we even hold it. To manage inventory properly, we first have to understand the different shapes it takes as it flows through a business. There are basically 6 distinct types of inventory, and I think mapping this out with a simple orange juice plant scenario makes it super clear. First off, you have raw materials. That's your fresh oranges and empty bottles. Once production kicks off, you get work in process, which is the juice actually being filtered and blended. Now, to keep the factory running, you need MRO supplies. These are maintenance items like spare gears or conveyor belts. Then you've got your finished goods, the sealed bottles ready to go out the door. When those bottles are loaded onto trucks, they become in-transit inventory. And finally, if any of that juice expires before it sells, it becomes dead stock. And here's the kicker. Every single one of these categories requires a totally different management approach. And managing all of this, it's a huge balancing act between the expense of holding too much stock and the disastrous opportunity costs of running short. Think about it. Ordering in massive bulk might reduce the cost of placing an order, but your holding costs, things like storage, insurance, and that tied-up capital, will just skyrocket. But on the other side, if you try to hold too little, your shortage costs spike. You lose sales, you end up paying for crazy expedited shipping, and worst of all, your customers lose trust in you. Which brings us nicely to Section 2, calculating the perfect order, finding that elusive balance. Because now that we know the costs, we can look at the math to actually control them. The best part is we don't have to guess how much to order. We have the EOQ, or economic order quantity. This formula takes your annual demand, your ordering cost, and your holding cost, and it mathematically pinpoints the absolute sweet spot for your lot sizes. It basically plots the declining curve of ordering costs against the rising line of holding costs and finds the exact lowest point on that total cost curve. It's brilliant. To put that into perspective, let's look at the Nothing Hill Co. clothing exporter example from our text. They need 960,000 units of raw material a year. Every time they place an order, it costs 12 Thai baht, and holding a unit costs 16 baht a year. If we plug that into the EOQ formula, which is just the square root of 2 times demand times ordering cost, all divided by holding cost, it spits out precisely 1,200 units per order to minimize their total costs. No guesswork, just optimal efficiency. Okay, so EOQ tells us exactly how much to order, but what about when? That is where the Reorder Point, or ROP, comes in. ROP tells you exactly when to pull the trigger on a new order, and it's based on your daily consumption rate and your delivery lead time. The whole goal here is seamless continuity. You want the delivery truck pulling up just as the very last box on your shelf is being emptied. Take Pilot Co., for example. They're selling 777 units a day, and it takes 15 days for a new delivery to arrive. Doing the math, that means they have to reorder the very moment their warehouse drops to 11,655 units. If they wait until they have, say, 10,000 units, they'll run out of stock before the truck ever arrives. But if they order early at 15,000, the truck gets there too soon, and their holding costs go through the roof. It's a tightrope walk. Moving right along to Section 3, Smart Inventory Strategies, specifically ABC analysis and just-in-time, because beyond pure math, we need to strategically categorize how we flow materials through our supply chain. You see, not all inventory is created equal. Treating a cheap little spare part the same way you treat a high-end finished product is just a massive waste of resources. Enter ABC analysis. It's basically the Pareto principle in action. Class A items might be a tiny fraction of your physical warehouse space, maybe just 10% of your items, but they represent 70 to 80% of your total inventory value. Those need the tightest control, frequent counting, and secure storage. Meanwhile, Class C items might take up a ton of space, but only hold about 10% of the value. You manage those with minimal records, because honestly, tracking them too tightly would cost more than the items themselves are worth. Then we have the legendary just-in-time, or JIT method. Toyota really pioneered this and made it famous. Instead of pushing a ton of stock into a warehouse and crossing your fingers that it sells, JIT is a pull system. Downstream demand literally triggers upstream production. The whole objective is to eliminate the 7 wastes, things like overproduction, pointless motion, and waiting around, by bringing materials to the production line exactly when they're needed. The ultimate dream of JIT? Driving your standing inventory all the way down to zero. All right, let's see how this works in the real world with Section 4 Vendor Managed Inventory case, putting theory into practice. I want you to just picture your local supermarket for a second. What happens if they suddenly just run out of bottled water? Unexpected stockouts like that create a panic that cascades rapidly up the chain. The supermarket panics and orders double. The distributor gets the double order, panics, and orders triple from the factory. The factory suddenly has to overwork its machinery. It's called the bullwhip effect, and it's exactly the problem our next strategy is designed to solve. So, vendor managed inventory, or VMI, shifts the storage and dispatch responsibility entirely to the supplier. Instead of the supermarket blindly guessing how much water to order, the water manufacturer actually gets direct, real-time access to the supermarket sales data. The supplier manages the inventory levels themselves. So inventory is held in only one place, communication is streamlined, and that whole panic ordering bullwhip effect is completely eliminated. Unilever is a brilliant real-world example of this from the text. They literally took over the stock management at their customers' warehouses. By seeing the actual real downstream demand, Unilever could perfectly align their own production schedules. And the results? Unbelievable. They boosted customer service levels from 95% to 98% while simultaneously slashing their overall holding costs. It was such a real game changer that today, about 70% of Unilever's total sales flow through VMI arrangements. And that brings us to our final stop, Section 5, Sustainable and Digital Inventory, the future of supply chains. We're going to look at how modern organizations are aligning these strategies with environmental responsibility and next-gen tech. Here's a question for you. How does having way too much stock actually impact a company's carbon footprint? It's a critical question because we usually just focus on the money, right? But holding unnecessary stock carries a massive ecological cost that we really can't ignore anymore. Sustainable inventory management tackles the heavy greenhouse gas emissions baked into our supply chains. Just think about warehouse climate control, the sheer amount of energy required to refrigerate or heat massive warehouses full of excess stock. Think about the transport emissions from shuffling goods between facilities for no good reason. And worst of all, throwing expired dead stock straight into landfills. When we optimize with tools like EOQ and JIT, we aren't just saving cash, we are genuinely helping to save the planet. And to really combat this waste, the industry is leaning heavily into digital tools. We're talking IoT sensors tracking temperature and humidity in real time so food and pharmaceuticals don't spoil. We've got AI and big data crunching massive data sets to give us incredibly accurate demand forecasting so we don't overproduce in the first place. And RFID tracking gives us that seamless real-time visibility we need to align stock perfectly with actual market demand. Okay, let's bring it all together with our key takeaways. Mastering inventory means treating it as the critical asset it is. You absolutely must balance your holding costs against your shortage costs. Stop guessing and use EOQ and ROP for mathematical precision. Work smarter by categorizing your value with ABC analysis and compress your supply chains using JIT or VMI. And lastly, embracing digital tech is for sure no longer optional if you want a sustainable, future-proofed operation. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to consider for your upcoming assignments and your future careers. Based on everything we've covered today, how will AI and big data fundamentally rewrite the inventory strategy of your future organization? The tools are always evolving, but remember, the core objective is always the same: getting the right product to the right place at exactly the right time. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and good luck putting these theories into practice.